I've heard people say that when they did meth, let's say they did it recreationally, like with their meth, and things seemed okay in their life, but then they became really addicted because of the physical aspects. Is there a difference between someone who has a great life? Will they not get as addicted to meth as someone who has a not so good a life?
That's a really good question. There's actually some amazing experiments and observations around the world that talk about this. So what you're talking about is biological dependency. And biological dependency is not the same thing as addiction. I genuinely like to describe them as biological dependency is a physical and biological adaptation to prolonged behavior of a certain substance. Like, for example, if you were in an accident and had to be put on, painkillers for a long enough period of time, the removal of that painkiller would be uncomfortable. In fact, you would experience what would be considered withdrawal symptoms. But that experience that we're observing is not addiction. That's biological dependency. Addiction is a psychological adaptation and an emotional adaptation to a behavior that gives you a sense of protecting parts of your life that don't feel safe. Right. So, for example, most people who do heroin, and I will say this because a lot of people don't understand that if you're in an accident and you end up in the hospital, you're put on something called diamorphine. And diamorphine is heroin. Most people who end up in the hospital, they come out and they just stop using. Why is it that most people just stop using when some people can't? The big differentiator is that the people who stop using have a life that they're excited to return to. They have something that they want to show up and actively be present for. They have a future that seems hopeful and safe. And the ones who don't are figuring out that for the first time by using, they remove the burden of experiencing a life that doesn't feel like a place they want to be. That's the big difference. And it's so important to recognize that because biological dependency is the model for which they use to build treatment for substance use disorder right now. And that's a big problem.
Do you have a thought about the physical aspect?
This whole conversation, something that I want to clarification I want to make, this idea of safety that we keep talking to. It's easy for someone to hear the word safety and think my life is safe because we typically, when we hear the word safety, we think physical safety.
Sure.
So someone might say like, of course, similar to what you just said, like I have, a home and I have a roof over my head and I have financial security and I have people who love me. And so there's this idea of like, it can be hard to wrap your head around safety the way that Adam and I are saying it. When I say like, oh, I feel safe to be with my anxiety, or Adam says like, I have a life that, excites me and feels safe. It can be hard to understand what that term safety really means. And so I want to bring light to that because it's not just physical safety. It's also emotional safety, psychological safety. They say that by the time a person is, hitting puberty, 12 or 13 years old, that they have, I'm going to put learned in quotes here because it's a very immature, black and white, rudimentary learning. But by the time we are 12 or 13, we have learned what we need to do in order to be loved and what we need to not do in order to be loved. And so that creates, here are the parts of me that are safe. Here are the things that I do or that I am that are safe for me to do or be. And here are the things that are not. And so addiction can be a cover up for those things. So for Adam, he did not feel safe to be certain parts of himself, but when he was using Adderall, those parts disappeared. That was like the way to remove it. And so, I have my own story with that. But so this is just to clarify that idea of safety. And to what Adam was saying about if you just remove the substance itself, that's harmful. I want to acknowledge that, there are, of course, medical and health reasons for someone to stop using and for someone to, in the world of disordered eating, for someone, you need to address the behaviors, you need to address the physical health of a person. And same thing with addiction. Like that person needs to go through that process of, detoxing and healing their body and all those pieces. So like, I know that Adam is not saying that that is like not necessary. Yeah. And I just want to make that clarification and just say that that's incomplete.
Yeah. The messaging itself about the messaging about the removal of substances rather than the act of replacement is the part I was speaking to.
And to relate this to the safety piece, whether the substance, as we've talked about, the substance is the coping mechanism for some level of lack of safety within that person. And so they are using that as the coping tool. And so if you just remove the coping tool, Now that person is left with this unsafe feeling or unsafe experience that they have nothing to use in its place. And so it is so important to not simply remove the substance or remove the coping tool or remove the behavior, but to first teach the person how to create safety within themselves, whether that's like somatic healing or whether that's finding other lifestyle behavior or like whatever it is. But that is a puzzle piece that you need to like slide into place while you are sliding the other one out of place. Otherwise, you are leaving that person with this like open wound that they have no salve to deal with it.